YouTubers working on and/or creating professional film/TV. Ain't that a double-edged sword? And speaking of which, isn't it so funny that YouTube itself has been around for such a short period of time in the grand scheme of entertainment, yet we all know what I'm talking about when I say that? Like, there's just some primal revulsion to the phrases YouTuber and professional in the same sentence as long as they aren't in the order of, oh god, that YouTuber is nowhere near professional.
Hey, what's up?
And by the standard of the general public, I wouldn't be surprised if that were a commonly held belief. After all, a lot of the time YouTubers find fame through a sort of guerrilla warfare tactic compared to most mainstream celebrities. Oftentimes they weren't famous for anything else beforehand. A good chunk of them don't have the polished, pristine looks you expect a celebrity to have. Trust me, I know from experience. And most importantly, their production quality is almost never near the level of a multi-million-dollar series or film. On the celebrity scale compared to mainstream Calvin Klein model-looking, naturally charming-ass superstars, YouTubers don't seem to fit the bill for that kind of popularity at all. And yet, there they are with their massive, usually self-built audiences and niches. Of course, that doesn't mean every big YouTuber deserves to get their own show just because they're big. That's stupid. Same way it's stupid that Amy Schumer keeps getting movie deals and Netflix specials, but if there's one thing she and unqualified but questionably popular influencers have in common, it's that for whatever reason, Hollywood keeps giving them chances. That and they're annoying as fuck. To give a quick summary of how this phenomenon started up, I'll paint you a little picture. Marketing executives in the late 2000s hear YouTube's on the rise, and they smell profit, so they take the website's biggest star and give him a movie. It just so happens that, unfortunately, the biggest channel at the time was Fred. Yeah, so Fred got a movie, and people didn't really like it all that much when it came out. Personally, I have a soft spot for the film, seeing as it came out when I was super young, and a good bit of it's so bad I laugh regardless. However, I won't deny it's nowhere near a genuinely good movie, but I'll tell you what it was. Popular. So popular, in fact, that the film got 2 sequels and a spin-off TV show, all of which were far worse, but again, for whatever reason, had high viewership. And thus, with Fred as the first experiment a success, the floodgates opened wide enough for us to see we'd made a big mistake. First, they gave the guy that made Fred another show, Marvin, and it is unquestionably one of the worst things I have ever seen. I wouldn't classify it as a show, cause it's more a cataclysm of what my sleep paralysis demons say hell is like. You know the annoying orange? Boom, he's got a show now, 2 seasons of 60 episodes on Cartoon Network with TheOdd1sOut's also on board for some reason. And it just keeps on going from there, show after show and film after film about fad after fad. Smosh the movie, Not Cool, the Shane Dawson movie, the angry video game nerd movie, and not a creative bone in any of their goddamn bodies. Here's what made a lot of these suck so bad. They felt arbitrary. None of them had a vision of what they'd do for TV or film, but hey, it's another box to tick off, and fame isn't forever, so might as well take it while they can. And that's what I hate most about all these older YouTuber projects. They set the standard for what to expect from YouTuber-created professional content, but it's obvious that the real reason they sucked was that the wrong people were given their own shows. Executives were and still do look at numbers first a lot of the time when choosing whether or not a creator gets the money to make something, which is obvious when you look at the YouTubers that have already gotten their own projects, and that's given rise to the idea that influencers can't make a good product when given the resources, but that's not true. People just can't figure it out because the best shows made by YouTubers are not about the YouTubers themselves. Parker Simmons was a YouTuber at first when he came up with Mau Mau Heroes of Pure Heart, an absolutely hilarious, well-animated series for Cartoon Network that started out online. Psychic Pebbles and Michael Cusack made Smiling Friends, a show so good the internet still hasn't stopped talking about it when the first season ended back in January. Vivzy Pop and the Spindlehorse team made an entire season of Hell of a Boss, and A24 picked up Hazbin Hotel. Good can come from YouTubers. All they need is an idea for something, anything that isn't just me if I was in a show. And the most consistent creators of good professional content that started on YouTube, as I hope you've picked up on, artists. It makes sense, doesn't it? The people who consume and put out creative, hard work that requires effort and talent would be the ones that make the best original properties. After all, they usually don't have anywhere close to the same numbers or relevance as the other guys listed, so that means they have to write off having a good idea and pitch to make it in the first place. And even in the instances where they aren't great, they're still 100 times better than non-animation YouTuber projects. And then there's TheOdd1sOut, who's not necessarily either of the two, yet also both at the same time, I guess befitting of his name. But before I tell you more about him, ad time. Do you like subscription services but feel like they could be giving you higher quality, more specific products? Well, today's sponsor Bespoke Post was made with that idea in mind, providing a multitude of specialized boxes of different products from lesser-known highbrow manufacturers through a monthly membership club. They've got clothes, outdoor supplies, food and drinks, sauces, and way more for you to choose from at all times. Every month they've got a whole new set of products to keep their listings fresh, so you're never tied down to just one kind of product, and if nothing speaks to you one month or another, you can skip or cancel at any time. And to make make sure your first box is right for you, after signing up for their free membership, they'll have you take a quiz regarding preferences and recommend a box to your specifications that you'll get to preview. And if they don't get it quite right, you can swap it for another box or skip the month entirely. Again, they're all about choice. Just like you can choose to get $70+ of great products in every box for a fraction of the price. Personally, I was gifted with the Forge set, including a beautiful Damascus steel knife and sheath with instructions on how to take care of it, the Dwell set featuring a super comfortable alcove blanket and fragrant incense cones, and the Weekender, a box with an all-purpose, high-durability, multi-use canvas bag complete with leather strap and reinforced interior. And these are all from this month's batch, so you better hurry, or else they could already be gone. If you want to get in on the action plus 20% off your first box, check out my link in the description and use code JustStop20 at checkout, or go to bespokepost.com/JustStop20. Thanks again to Bespoke Post for sponsoring, and back to what I was saying. On the slim chance you haven't heard of the guy, TheOdd1sOut's, aka James, was a Tumblr artist that started a YouTube channel where he made semi-animated storytime videos. Something that had been previously pioneered by others like Swoozy and Domix, but blew up into a massive base of creators after James started gaining relevance. It caught on with a ton of artists due to YouTube's shift towards favoring watch time over views, meaning hardworking animators that put out 2 minutes of content every month couldn't get by as it was. And storytime videos made for an outlet that could be longer, easier on animators, and could serve as a gateway to younger creators that didn't have quite the same level of skill but wanted to participate. It was a big revolution of content, and indirectly it kinda helped spur on the creation of my channel, which was originally inspired by people that criticized storytime animators, so in a way, if James wasn't around, neither would I. So what do I think of his content personally? You know, it's alright. I respect the effort and animation, and I was a fan of James's 6 years ago when I was 12, but just naturally, with the passage of time, I grew out of it. I kinda find James a little bland, to be honest. He isn't a total bore or anything, but much like his art style, the personality he presents in videos, at least in more recent ones, feels simplified for the sake of productivity and greater appeal. No hate to the guy, I barely watch his content anymore to begin with, but the general opinion I had of him was definitely lingering when I heard he got picked up for a Netflix series. I mean, good for him regardless, I don't want to downplay the achievement, but like I said, there's a scale for these kind of things, and James doesn't quite fall into the category leaning one way or another, so I had no idea what to expect, which did have me interested. Then more info came out about the cartoon he was working on, and I kept feeling mixed signals. I couldn't get a good grasp of what to think. Promotional images showed James's character in a world where no one looks anything like him, which I found concerning, but the other showrunner James chose to work with was Ethan Banville, who wrote Josh is Done, the best episode of Drake and Josh, but also his background in animation is mostly mediocre, and he's never been a showrunner before. Then the first couple trailers dropped, and it wasn't looking great, Chief. I would quickly elaborate on my thoughts regarding the teasers, but I'm about to do that in lengthy detail since, yeah, they were a good representation of the show, so transition. First question I had going in was, just how involved was James in the production of the series? It's an important ask considering a creator with too little control can't really be blamed for the property's failure if it turns out bad, but they also can't really reap the rewards if it's considered good. Looking at James though, he's involved in pretty much everything he could be other than doing the animation himself. He's the creator, obviously, a producer, executive producer, a writer, and a VA, providing the voice of the main character, James. Wait, is this another YouTuber inserts themselves into a show centering around them and their daily antics type deal? Technically. Apparently, the character in the show is not James, he just has the same name, and the same look, and the same voice despite him supposedly being a teenager. Okay, truth be told, I'm not a fan of this. Firstly, from a context-specific perspective, James does not feel like a younger version of the actual guy nor character at all. He's just James, but in a smaller body. Actually, this is gonna get confusing if I keep switching which James I'm talking about, so I'll call the character James and the real guy IRL. James has barely any personality of his own, except for the traits that he gets and loses episode to episode depending on the plot. For instance, in the 4th episode when he sees a line cutter, he's very vocal about his feelings and lays it out bluntly. Then 3 episodes later, when the line cutter from before decides to stay in his treehouse, James can't bring himself to say his true thoughts. They're interchangeable qualities. Basically, none of them stand out or stick to him from episode to episode, and the few qualities that do stick out are all negative. James is lazy, he's a procrastinator, a coward, self-indulgent, a liar, and annoying. A lot of the plots for episodes come from these negative traits of James's and him trying to overcome them, or not, but he doesn't show any indication of positive attributes, so there's not much to define him other than with those negative ones. It feels like IRL wanted to include himself in the show for branding purposes or whatever, and he thought, ah yes, this is me but younger, so I'll write him like I would write myself but with more flaws. And IRL just so happens to write himself in an incredibly boring manner, something that happens to a lot of people when they try to write a character that's also a representation of them. So with that in mind, all that stuck around were the flaws. Flaws that don't make him come off like a kid that needs to learn, but an adult who's just super unappealing, and his visual representation isn't helping either. Maybe it'd be easier to take in the illusion that this is a younger version of IRL if he didn't look like the same character IRL uses but shorter. Whenever he's not in school, I have to be reminded he's supposed to be a kid, and when he is in school, I get confused thinking he isn't a kid. He's got parents and rules and shit to follow, but he doesn't act differently from his videos. His mannerisms have not been updated or changed to suit a younger character at all. I can believe Dipper pines as a kid despite his voice sounding deeper because he looks like a kid for one. He's going through puberty, so a deeper voice is excusable, not to mention funny on a meta level, and Dipper acts like a child would. James has none of that, and the fact IRL decided to voice the character without attempting to sound younger in any way makes him sound like a 26-year-old man, because he's being voiced by a 26-year-old man who doesn't have a lot of voice acting experience, so he doesn't know how to manipulate his vocals in a meaningful way, and that goes beyond just pitch range. During the time before the series released and all we had were small YouTube clips to hype it up, I saw one of them and believed IRL wasn't doing a great job voice acting, exacerbated by the professionals acting around him, and decided to tweet about it, which caused a bit of a massive stir. A lot of people thought the same, another big chunk completely wrote my criticisms off, but most could agree that, at best, it sounded fine, and yeah, when James is screaming, or basically solely when he's screaming, he sounds good, but all other times, not so much. The problem I have with it is that IRL isn't acting, he's doing his YouTuber reading off a script voice. You know, it's not the same as how he would normally talk if there wasn't a script, and while that's perfectly fine during long videos where he's talking constantly for 12 minutes to an audience, it doesn't work nearly as well when he's playing a character. IRL sounds as though he's reading off his lines to the audience instead of to the character he's supposed to be talking to, and that makes his line delivery far less genuine. IRL, in particular, script reading voice is also peppier and less emotive if he isn't yelling his guts out, so it almost comes off as condescending the way he speaks, and yeah, comparatively to the other characters who are professional VAs, James sounds monotone and disinterested, though I can see why IRL went that way, even if it wasn't the right decision. Basically, every episode starts with James going into a rant about whatever issue he's facing in the current situation, and it's for sure meant to call back to how IRL often rants about his problems or things on his mind in video, but if the whole episode were formatted that way, it wouldn't be an episode. It would be no different than IRL's video content, so there's more, but IRL doesn't read it like that's the case. He reads it like he's reading for a video the whole time, and his performance suffers for it. It could be from a lack of vocal direction, or maybe IRL thought that was the best way to portray the character, but right now I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't, and it gets grating when he's the main character. I never thought I'd say this about a YouTuber's professional series, but IRL has too much involvement for the show to act like it isn't about IRL as he regularly is in video. He talks in the same way he's known to do so, he acts in the same way. His persona's avatar is intentionally drawn to be simplistic to a point that it's hard to convey how young or old he is, so a quote-unquote younger version is the same character with a third of the height. Nothing about James as a character screams kid, especially to the fans, who this is obviously pandering to so they watch the show. If IRL was replaced as the voice, given a new character design that looks like a child and was otherwise scripted the same, well, it may not have been fully believably written, it would have made more sense, but it also wouldn't have signaled to James's audience, hey, it's TheOdd1sOut's out! I mean, it's not TheOdd1sOut's out, but you know, it looks like him, but he made this show, you should watch it! Because let's be real, James's over-involvement and shoehorning in might be at a detriment to the show, but if IRL weren't involved, there most likely wouldn't have been a show at all. For those that have watched the series the whole way through, can you even tell me what the premise is exactly? Cause here's how I describe it. James is a white blob kid living in small-town Arizona. He's got a scientist mom and neighbor, and aside from a talking crocodile best friend named Max, the town's also filled with whatever miscellaneous character models the studio that animated it had lying around, all of whom James interacts with, I guess. The setup isn't all too thought out or explained in the show is what I'm trying to say, though funnily enough, IRL made a video talking about pitching a show to networks, and he described the premise of Oddballs as, James lives in a town full of scientists and meets their children as well as the offspring of their experiments, and James interact with them. Yeah, his pitch doesn't give a clear indication of what James will be doing in the series either, and to me, that's pretty indicative of the show's focus. All over the place. Usually you want to center these kinds of shows around particular settings, like take SpongeBob for example. He's a guy that lives in a world of weird and eccentric characters too, but he's got specific interests, hobbies, and jobs that help inform you of his character, the world, the sidecast, and the kind of scenarios SpongeBob gets into that are unique to him. Most of the time he's either at the Krusty Krab, Mrs. Puff's boating school, Jellyfish Fields, his, Patrick, or Squidward's house, etc. What unique places does James go to in Oddballs? He goes to school. It's a generic school. He's at home sometimes. It's a generic home with a generic bedroom for him. Oh, there's his treehouse that he does stuff in every few episodes. That's at least a distinctive landmark, though the inside is, again, super generic compared to the outside, so I can't remember for sure how often it's used, but you get what I'm saying. James's city setting is completely default for a cartoon, and he never does much of anything that would give a clue into his interests or wants or any of that. He's missing a key bit of characterization, and it makes him and the setting he's around both soulless and equally vague. How was I supposed to know the entire city is full of scientists? There's never expository dialogue about it. The only characters we see doing sciencey things are Max and James's parents and one side character, and most of the rest of the side cast barely gets any focus, so how should I know? What does the horse girl do? Or this bunny guy? Or this fucking living volcano here? Or are they all there for the sake of being eye candy to spruce up an otherwise completely forgettable setting? What about the green slime guy? He's supposed to be a literal demon, and he has a dad, so how does that factor into the whole scientific creation shit? Is that even applicable here? Has the whole project been tilted to where it's nothing more than what it is on screen? And you want to know the funniest parts? Remember that pitching a show video I literally mentioned like a minute ago? Well, IRL talks about these specific things I just went over and emphasizes how important they are, yet they are missing from his show. How do you do that? How does that happen? But back to the characters, I will say there is one I did find entertaining. Max the Crocodile. He's nice, fun, and honestly I would have preferred it if he were the main character instead of James. He's got this interesting dynamic with his parents who view him more like an experiment than a son, and that leads to some of the few laughs the show was able to get from me. His background also makes the first episode slightly more memorable. It's about James and Max giving life to a toaster, and the dialogue in that particular episode is way more unnatural and juvenile than others, probably because it was the one episode IRL wrote for, but instead of basically being the SpongeBob episode where they take care of a clam, it's slightly more of its own thing since Max treats raising the toaster like he was treated by his parents. I like that aspect of his character, how he's been sort of traumatized and given a different view on certain matters thanks to how he was raised. Too bad it's not in any other episode. There's a gold mine of potential here. Why isn't it being used? You could be writing episodes based around Max and his thoroughly unique character and background, but no, you focus on a bunch of generic plots with a weird and quirky Snapchat filter over it. Episode 3 is basically a worse version of Nasty Patty from SpongeBob. Episode 4 is pretty much every "we were at the front of the line, but hijinks sent us to the back and we keep trying to get back to the front" story. You know, that was actually an episode of Drake and Josh. Maybe Ethan Banfield took some inspiration there. Episode 6 is all the "join a thing but I'm cheating and that hurts someone" scenario. I'm pretty sure that was in Drake and Josh too. I could keep going on. A couple ideas are slightly more creative in concept, but in execution, they all go exactly how you expect them to. And with James at the center focus, the characters aren't really helping. Idea: get rid of James and the other annoying, unlikable future girl entirely. Make the whole story about Max, the talking crocodile. Spruce up the setting, give the characters a little more cohesion to make it feel like they belong together in the world, give them a new sidecast, ba-boom! I know I literally just took away every aspect of the series but Max and said to rebuild it from there, but come on, I gotta work with what I'm given here. Clearly that was the process behind creating the, I don't want to say art style, I guess aesthetic of Oddballs. Speaking on the animation alone, it's perfectly fine if not inconsistent. Most of the background characters are pretty obviously rigged, and I mean that in a negative way, but generally the cast is expressive and full of energy. That's not my issue with how it looks, at least not the big one. What I find so irritating about the aesthetic of Oddballs is how nothing looks like it belongs there at all. I don't know how to put my finger on it, but from one character to the next, they each look like they come from the backgrounds of other series. They've got varying proportions and sizes, the line thickness between characters can be weirdly different, the style for how eyes and noses and ears and heads are drawn is all over the place, the way shading is used, if at all, varies wildly, nothing looks like it belongs in the setting, and if it's going for a sort of clashing art styles together appeal, there's a way to make semi-external characters look like they belong in a world while still being different. Drawn Together is a perfect example. That mixes so much shit together, but at the same time there's a sort of consistency to their colors and shading and whatnot that lets you distinctly say, yeah, that's a character from Drawn Together. If I put up one of the various Oddballs designs, are you gonna be able to tell me it was from Oddballs? Take your pick, editor, it can be any one of them. They all equally look too distinctly not by the same artist or team. You could say they're all the odd one out, but if all of them are the odd one out, then none of them are. And that's all that Oddballs is. It wants to act like it's special and different and wacky and all that, but it isn't. It's slightly below average. The worst thing any show can be. I'll take a train wreck any day over a mild annoyance, and that's what I felt watching so much of Oddballs. It's just such a nothing burger so much of the time. I probably wouldn't have finished it if it weren't so short. Every episode ranges from 13 to 15 minutes, so it wasn't too much of a time waster in the long run, but I only realized how short the episodes were in retrospect, since I felt like I aged 10 years binging through it. It was like being on shrooms, but boring. Not that I would know. I couldn't even tell what demographic it was going for. There are all these dark jokes involved, but also the first episode in particular is super kiddie, but also not, cause Max is fucking bleeding out with green blood? Is this meant for general audiences, IRL's YouTube viewers? It's also hard to quantify or categorize. I suppose, in the end, it did what my thoughts led me to believe it would be, a subpar middle ground between terrible and exceptional. IRL did have some ideas for ways to take the series, but also it comes across like another arbitrary thing he did to tick another box. First a book, then a game, now a TV show. Can't wait for Odd Ones Out the movie, coming this fall exclusively to Redbox. I don't know. I couldn't feel the heart. In conclusion, Max was cool, animation was alright, everything else was mid or bad. Congrats to James on making the show, but now that it's been made, you can go ahead and do something else like watch Big Bang Theory or paint dry. They're about on the same level as Oddballs in terms of entertainment. I've been Just Stop, and you've all been bitches. Peace out.